this is going to be the breakout session about interventional radiology. The way this session is going to work is really we're just going to be taking questions from the audience. So if you guys could go ahead and type any questions about IR or even DR residency that you have in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and field those questions with our panelists. First, I'll just do brief introductions with our panelists. So to start with, we can introduce Megan, or Dr. Patel. He's currently faculty at the University of Chicago. He obtained his medical degree from the University of Illinois College of Medicine. He then did his residency at U Chicago and did his IR fellowship at Northwestern. For his first job after fellowship, he was at the University of Arizona, where he also served as associate program director there. And he's now currently faculty at the University of Chicago. Up next, we have Dr. Swirsky. He is a current PGY3 and second-year radiology resident at Northwestern in the integrated IR/DR pathway. He did his undergraduates and medical school at the University of Miami. And then next, we have Dr. Yu, who's also a PGY3 second-year radiology resident in the integrated IR/DR pathway at University of Chicago. He did his undergrad at Emory University and then medical school at University of Kentucky. So I think one question I'll just pose to our panelists just to start off would be, why did you guys choose interventional radiology?
I can start. So originally, I went in my school, want to do surgery. I was interested in surgery, long-time neurosurgery. I want to do something with procedures. Then through my neurosurgery rotation, I found out there's something called neuro-IR. Then I learned that there's something about interventional radiology, which is very cool because we apply the most recent advanced technology to image-guided diagnosis and the procedures. I think that's a future where medicine is headed to. So I decided to apply for interventional radiology residency.
I can go next. Kind of a number of reasons I went into the field, but I'll try to be brief in that I just find everything about the field to be exciting. From minimally invasive procedures, I found surgery and other areas of medicine sometimes we're fighting complications more often than not. And I think IR is the way of the future in terms of procedural medicine. I really like that we work in every organ of the body. We're on the cutting edge in terms of technology. And I really just love the camaraderie in the field as well. I think you find really great people. Everybody's very interested in teaching and learning and kind of advancing forward. Those are just a few reasons. I could go on all day about it, though.
Yeah, my my answer is not nearly probably as well thought out. Long story short, I was doing a volunteer stint at a hospital during high school, and I was in radiology department, and this was like small community hospital. Old-timey radiologist that did both IR, DR, they kind of covered everything. And, I was like a 15-year-old just volunteering there. One of the older IRs just grabbed me, he's like, hey, come check this out. We're going to go do this case. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Just walk back with them. It's like an angio suite. And they pulled like a catheter fragment out of a kid's heart. He had some kind of like indwelling line fractured. He pulled it out. And, I was just watching on the screen from the control room. I'm like, okay, this kind of, I don't know what's going on. But then he walked out and he kind of showed it to me. He like had it in his hand and it was like this bloody catheter fragment. And he goes, dude, it's just like a video game. I was like, done. Like I want to be a doctor. I wanted to like go to medical school, like do whatever this guy's doing. I want to do IR. So I actually kind of knew really early. It's mostly just the cool factor. I wish I could say, again, I don't have anything intelligent to say like the rest of these guys. Like it's just the cool factor. Like you do cool stuff.
Yeah, I had a very early similar experience where I was just blown away by just the cool factor itself. I think that's a really great way to put it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually on my IR rotation at the Jesse Brown VA, and the kind of that comparison to a video game, it's really not too far off. Really, it's just a lot of fun, and you get to work with your hands, and you see the results right then and there. And the patients, as soon as they wake up, they a lot of times feel a lot better from what we've done in the angio suite. So definitely a super rewarding experience. We do have a question in the chat that's talking about kind of the relationship between the IR and DR departments at your respective institutions. Do you guys feel like the DR and IR departments are kind of getting a little bit separated, or do you feel like there's still kind of a good relationship between the two? Megan, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, let me go ahead and start on this one. So I think the relationship is really good. Now, I'll give this from my perspective as an academic radiologist. I also did a year stint in private practice, and so I can kind of touch on that too. In the academic world, you're basically, as an IR, let's face it, nowadays we're doing a ton of interventional oncology. So your body imagers and your thoracic imagers are going to be your best friends. You're calling on them all the time to look at studies with you. Tumor boards together, like we all work very closely together on mutual patients. Not only that, but just being someone who is, always in touch with patients, can easily access things like anesthesia, procedural services, all that stuff makes you a valuable asset to the radiology department. For example, in our institution, we often help the MSK section with tough bone biopsies or ablations, cementoplasties, that kind of thing. It's really just about how much you're willing to help as an individual IR, because there's so much like cross-pollination that can happen with MSK, body radiology, chest. Honestly, like I've even helped the mammo folks sometimes. They have a hard time getting a biopsy. Like I'll jump in there and I'll come help them out. There's almost no one you can't work with. Nuke Med, for example, right? Like on the regular, I'm working with Nuke Med when it comes to like Y90 dosimetry and how we can improve our post imaging and all that stuff. I can't live without my DR department. Now, private practice, it's even more intimate because oftentimes you are a DR, right? Like I said, I did a year of private practice, and almost 50% of the time I was a DR, and so I would run cases by them all the time, and they would call me with imaging findings and be like, hey, do you think you want to do this one on call? And we kind of sort it out. Despite the fact that the residencies have started to split, I don't see a future where I don't see anytime in the near future that the two departments are going to split, at least from a relationship standpoint. Even if at some point, like some places start splitting up IR department, you're always going to be in touch with your DRs. You can't live without them.
That was really cool to hear from our perspective. I think as residents about your different experiences. From the residency perspective, you're right. I think it's interesting that the programs have split, and that has certain effects. I encourage people to read an article. I think it was written by my friend Daryl Goldman and Eric Keller. It was about kind of like how IR/DR residents can sometimes be a citizen of two worlds, but not at the same time. But to be honest, I haven't really felt that to be the case in my program. I just think that you're so as an IR/DR resident, you are a DR resident more or less for the first 3.5 years of your residency. And my co-residents, including Vamsi, like we're always around each other all day. I feel like a diagnostic radiology resident most of the time, which we should be because we're getting that dual certification. I feel encouraged by my diagnostic attendings, especially like in body and nuclear medicine and places where the clinical interests overlap. I think they'll pay attention to that and mentor you in different kind of ways, while also just myself preparing for a possibility of doing diagnostic radiology at some point in my career, which anybody can do. So I think it's a really positive relationship, and I also think that all the things we talk about in IR, we talk about relying on imaging all the time and becoming increasingly reliant on better imaging and using it before, during, and after procedures, and the only way to do that is to count on your diagnostic radiology colleagues and learn from them.
Yeah. From a resident's perspective, I hang out with my DR co-resident all the time. The bad things about being a IR/DR resident is that you kind get to participate activity in both DR and IR, because some activity that is like strictly pertain to IR, like IR and other events more focused on IR. You get to go to or attend these events, and then on the other hand, there's a DR activity you get to attend. So I really enjoy being like a resident of an integrated program.
Can I add one more thing? And this is peripherally related, but the other thing that I like to remember is there are a lot of what IR does has potential areas of overlap, right? And everyone talks about this with interventional cardiology, with vascular surgery, interventional pain, interventional nephrology. When you're thinking about like the real world, and turf battles aren't as bad in the real world as like they are on Ant Mini forums, or I don't even know if you guys still use Ant Mini, but you know what I mean, like all the forums. They're not that bad in real life. But when they do happen, you have to think about what's your relative advantage, right? The interventional cardiologist has been doing clinical medicine for 6 years. And then they do a year of fellowship and technical training, imaging, and boom, they're there. The vascular surgeon has been operating like OR, clinical medicine for what, 5 years, 6 years? And then they do some rotations in endovascular work, and now it's integrated in the work, and boom, there they are. You've been doing imaging, right, for 6 years or for 5 years. That's your relative advantage. When you step in an IR suite, you see things that interventional cardiologists, vascular surgeons, just like it doesn't compute in the brain the same way as it does for a radiologist. So I fundamentally impress this on, on Clark and our other residents, like you have to learn the imaging. Like that's your advantage, right? You can step into a room and understand ultrasound and CT better than anyone else who could potentially handle a needle. Like it's the radiologist, right? Like you can see it unlike anyone else. And so it's really important to learn the radiology.
All right, I think we can squeeze in one more question really quick. 2 questions from the chat talking about the work-life balance in IR and possibly the kind of call schedule. If you guys could just quickly, maybe 30 seconds talk about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, I can start with this question. I will answer both actually, because they're kind of similar. I did a surgery internship, and like I said, initially I was interested in surgery. So if you're coming from a DR perspective, like into IR might sound like a little more difficult in terms of time, because in DR you arrive at like 8, and after 5 you leave. But in IR, for example, in our program, we start doing pre-runs like 7, and although the end of the day is 5, but we open still until like 6, 7, or even 8. And if you're on call, there's a GI bleed or trauma, you like come in the middle of the night or over the weekend. So from a DR perspective, if after 5 you don't feel comfortable doing IR or doing procedure, you don't feel satisfied, then IR might not be a good field for you. But coming from surgery, like I said, when I was on surgery rotation, I wake up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock and stay here. I don't know, like often work like 90 to 100 hours per week. So IR is time wise is I feel it's chill, and I love IR, and so time is not a thing for me. That being said, I think you guys compare with surgery, vascular surgery. I mean, you deal with cold leg and AAA all the time. This is not something like when you deal with a GI bleed, you can tell them, oh, keep transfusing, I will be there in 2 hours. You really have to be there as soon as possible. Likewise, neurosurgery, stroke calls, and that kind of stuff. CT surgery, I don't know much, but it sounds like the heart stuff is pretty serious. Trauma is serious. Plastic is okay. Residency is tough, but in real world, if you go into cosmetics, you will be rich, I guess. And also, I don't know much about ortho or urology.
Yeah, I guess I would say that the answer to this question is kind of difficult to answer because it's so highly variable in all those specialties, and especially IR in terms of practice structure, and Dr. Patel alluded to his experiences in private practice. I'm sure they're very different. I think different states where you practice, and you know, if you're certified in IR, you know, some places might have you taking stroke thrombectomy call, for example, which can drastically, you know, I assume that would drastically, you know, change the way you view call and work-life balance in general. I guess the bottom line when I think about it is that number one, I would say that, you know, even though I do love diagnostic radiology and I love, you know, my days on DR, I do feel I don't identify as an IR, I guess I should say. And even though I work longer hours on IR, you know, I kind of like sleep better at night when I'm on IR rotations because I'm a little physically exhausted versus on diagnostic radiology. I'm kind of, you know, it's a shorter day, but it doesn't, and it mentally challenges. It can be exhausting, but it's just a little bit different. And I feel, you know, I think it's important to pick a specialty that you just can see yourself doing every day because it just makes you happy. And that's what I feel in IR. And you know, the call thing, we start taking buddy call as junior residents now. So, you know, holding the pager for a week, I got my first taste of that. Came in to place, you know, a filter that was very indicated, and we came in to do a percutaneous nephrostomy. Both were life-saving procedures for the patient at the time. So, you know, that's definitely a rewarding aspect of call. There are definitely tons of negative aspects of call that I've seen, and, you know, the heavy call. But to compare it to all of the named surgical specialties in that question, I would say it's a better, you know, it's a better lifestyle. I think I can unequivocally say that. Maybe some IR programs out there have their own inpatient services and admitting services. Those are pretty rare, but I think that changes the game a little bit. So again, I would say variable experiences depending on where you're at. But overall, IR definitely fits in between diagnostic radiology and surgery in terms of, you know, traditionally think about work-life balance.
Thanks, Adam. We're gonna have to cut it off right there. We're running a little bit over. I'd like to thank our three panelists for joining us, sharing their experiences with us today. And thanks for all the participants who came out. Hope it was a useful session for you guys. If you have any more questions that you want us to answer, you can email them to chicagoRadiologyExpo@gmail.com, and that's in the chat. And then we'll get back to you for any additional questions you might have. Thanks everyone for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I put my email in the chat as well if anybody, you know, wants to talk. Thanks, Vamsi, for hosting us.
No problem, guys.